Hello and welcome. Today we delve into a moment that forever changed the course of aerial warfare, the dawn of a new era in the skies over occupied France during the spring of 1943. It's a story of seemingly clumsy flying milk bottles preparing to clash with battle-hardened German fighters, yet harboring secrets that would shake the balance of power in the air. But what if those bulky American fighters, dismissed as slow and awkward, were actually the harbingers of a deadly revolution? Could a squadron of inexperienced pilots flying unfamiliar planes confront the seasoned Luftwaffe aces? Was the seemingly primitive design of the P-47 Thunderbolt just a facade hiding unmatched firepower? And what if the very aircraft that looked like a dinosaur was about to redefine aerial combat forever? Are these clumsy giants the future of air dominance, or just a fleeting anomaly? Could the Germans, confident in their superior agility, truly grasp what was coming? And how did a machine designed to be a monster become the most effective weapon in the Allies' arsenal, turning the tide of the war? In this video, we will unravel the story behind the thunderous rise of the P-47, separating myth from reality and revealing the shocking truth behind one of the most pivotal aircraft of World War II. The real battle, it seems, was about to begin. Right now. April the 8th in the year of our Lord 1943, a significant moment unfolded high above the occupied territories of France, specifically at an altitude of approximately 27,000 feet. The sky was clear, with an unblemished canopy of crystal-clear atmosphere stretching endlessly in all directions. From within the cockpit of a Focke-Wulf FW-190A-5, Oberleutnant Ralph Herrmann, a seasoned German fighter pilot, couldn't suppress a subtle smirk that played on his face, despite the necessity of the oxygen mask covering it. His expression betrayed a mixture of amusement and confidence as he observed the approaching silhouettes of enemy aircraft laboriously climbing through the clouds to join the formation. These distant shapes, tentative and somewhat ungainly in their ascent, were making their first foray into combat over the occupied European continent. Herrmann, a veteran ace with extensive experience fighting in the skies over Yakishvili, watched the incoming American fighters with keen interest. He was 26 years old, a man well-versed in aerial combat tactics and the art of dogfighting. Yet the sight before him was new and somewhat puzzling. The aircraft they approached were the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt fighters, making their debut in the theater of war. As he transmitted a sardonic remark to his squadron wingman, a light chuckle escaped him, despite the seriousness of the moment. "It's nothing but flying milk bottles," he quipped, referring to the bulky, somewhat clumsy appearance of these American machines. His words carried an undercurrent of mockery, an attempt to dismiss these newcomers as inferior or just amusing novelties. Below the German pilots, a formation of 16 P-47C Thunderbolts from the United States Army Air Forces was making a ponderous ascent. These aircraft, part of the 4th Fighter Group, moved upward in tight, disciplined formations. Their engines, massive Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double WASP units, producing each around 2,000 horsepower, strained against their own weight of approximately 7 tons. To pilots who were accustomed to the sleek, agile Spitfires of Britain or the nimble Soviet fighters that seemed almost like swallows in their agility, these American fighters appeared almost comical in their bulk. Their fuselages, barrel-shaped and topped with greenhouse-style canopies, seemed overly thick and rounded. Their wings, seemingly too small relative to the massive bodies they supported, added to their peculiar appearance. The propellers, spinning with a size and presence that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's arsenal, further emphasized their unconventional design. What Herrmann and his fellow German pilots could not have known at that moment was that these seemingly ungainly aircraft represented the dawn of a new era in aerial combat, an era that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the skies. These American fighters, initially dismissed as cumbersome and slow, were on the verge of becoming the most effective tools the Allies possessed to systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter force. Within a mere 18 months, what was then seen as the clumsy flying milk bottles would evolve into instruments of terror. Their 8 machine guns, Browning Model 28 guns, with a combined firing rate of approximately 6,000 rounds per minute, would become the shrill, terrifying sound of destruction in the German skies. The mathematics of their destructive capability were formidable. Each aircraft carried roughly 3,400 rounds of ammunition, enough to unleash a devastating barrage capable of destroying enemy aircraft in less than 2 seconds if fully concentrated. The transformation of these aircraft from objects of ridicule into deadly weapons began on that very morning in April. The pivotal moment arrived when Major Donald B. Bully, commander of the 135th Fighter Squadron, noticed the German formation positioning itself for an attack. Bully, a veteran who had previously flown with the Eagle Squadron and had recently transferred from the Royal Air Force's Spitfire units just weeks before, understood instinctively what his squadron members had yet to realize. To survive and succeed in the P-47 Thunderbolt required a fundamental shift in tactics, an acceptance that conventional fighter combat principles, which emphasized agility, climb rate, and turning radius, would no longer suffice. The Thunderbolt was a radical departure from traditional fighter design philosophies. While the Germans continued to develop lighter, more maneuverable interceptors optimized for quick climbs and agile turns, the Americans had built something entirely different, a high-altitude, heavy, powerful aircraft designed to use its mass, raw power, and overwhelming firepower to redefine aerial warfare. On that particular morning, among the 56 American pilots spread across the French skies, there were still men who would eventually become legendary figures, flight aces whose names would evoke fear and admiration among Luftwaffe fighters. But on April the 8th, they were still relatively inexperienced, flying unfamiliar planes and facing an opponent that had been in combat since 1939. The German fighters, veterans of battles over Poland, France, Britain, and in the early days of its development, the concept of military aircraft saw a remarkable fusion of quantity and quality, culminating in a form of technological dominance that could only be described as overwhelming. This evolution sparked a transformation not only in capability, but also in the mindset of pilots from adversarial nations, especially when it came to the formidable German aviators. Their initial confidence, bolstered by the superiority of their fighters, was gradually replaced by growing fear as they realized what a synchronized array of machine guns, the Browning type, could accomplish at a mere 400 yards. The once confident laughter of German pilots, echoing through the skies in mock bravado, was swiftly silenced by the horrifying realization of what their opponent's aircraft could do in combat. During this tumultuous period, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt emerged from a state of near panic in June of 1940, embodying a dramatic response to the demands of wartime innovation. As German fighters swept across the skies over France with relentless force and precision, the chief designer of Republic Aviation, Alexander Cartway, born in Georgia, was tasked with crafting an aircraft capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best fighters at high altitude. However, instead of merely meeting these specifications, Cartway envisioned and ultimately designed something far more formidable, a machine that would redefine the very boundaries of what was considered possible in fighter aircraft. The aircraft he conceived was colloquially described as a monstrous creation, a true dinosaur among airplanes, as he candidly told his design team. Yet despite its intimidating size and appearance, he reassured them that this dinosaur would have good proportions, balancing power and purpose. The prototype, designated XP-47B, took its first flight on the 6th of May, 1941, and it stunned all who witnessed its maiden voyage. When it lifted off, it was startling to note that the aircraft's empty weight stood at nearly 10,000 pounds, approximately 65% more than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. Its formidable mass was accentuated by the massive turbo supercharger system, with intricate ducting running through the rear fuselage, giving the aircraft an almost gravid or pregnant appearance, an unmistakable sign of its immense power. As test pilots approached the aircraft for the first time, they were typically struck by disbelief. Could this be a flying machine? To their astonishment, not only did it fly, but it performed at altitudes where other fighters struggled to breathe. Powered by the Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine, an 18-cylinder double wasp capable of generating 2,000 horsepower, the Thunderbolt could sustain full power at altitudes as high as 27,000 feet, an altitude where German fighters found themselves gasping for air. The turbo supercharger, driven by exhaust gases, delivered near sea-level performance in the rarefied air of the stratosphere, where traditional superchargers would have failed. Despite initial skepticism from figures like Major Hubert "Hub" Zika, who commanded the 56th Fighter Group stationed in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the aircraft's capabilities became increasingly apparent through rigorous training and combat. During its early days in training, between September 1942 and January 1943, the P-47 caused more American casualties than Germans would incur in the initial months of combat. It was a demanding aircraft. It ground-looped upon landing, torque rolled during takeoff, and it dove with an enthusiasm that challenged pilots to understand the effects of compressibility, a phenomenon where shock waves form on the wings, causing controls to freeze and making the aircraft difficult to handle. However, those pilots who mastered the Thunderbolt discovered something extraordinary. One such pilot, Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma, who would go on to become one of the most successful American aces with 27 confirmed victories, recalled his first flight with vivid detail. It was akin to being strapped to a locomotive. The raw power was almost inconceivable. He described the experience as less about flying and more about aiming a missile. The aircraft's formidable power was matched by its impressive presence in the air. The first combat encounters, which took place in April and May of 1943, confirmed many of the German pilots' fears and prejudices. The P-47 was unable to turn with the Focke-Wulf FW-190s, couldn't climb as swiftly as the Messerschmitt Bf-109s, and struggled with the nimble handling at medium altitudes, exposing its vulnerabilities. German pilots quickly devised tactics to exploit these weaknesses, attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolts struggled to respond effectively. They preferred to engage in turning fights, where agility and maneuverability trumped raw firepower. One notable report came from Hutchman Isef Pips Priller, the commanding officer of the Yakasvoda 26 Squadron. After his first encounter with the American fighter, he reported back with brutal honesty, "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck." In the tumultuous skies over Europe during the early months of aerial combat, new and seemingly formidable adversaries emerged, challenging long-standing perceptions of fighter prowess. The German forces, confident in their tactics and reputation, appeared to have the upper hand, especially when viewed through the harsh lens of statistics. During the initial month of American fighter operations, the figures painted a sobering picture. American P-47 Thunderbolts had suffered the loss of 14 aircraft, while German fighters had managed to shoot down only 3 of their counterparts. Such figures, indicative of the combat's brutal reality, seemed to bolster German confidence, fueling their belief that their tactics and aircraft were superior. From their vantage point, the Royal Air Force's Spitfire squadrons observed these developments with quiet amusement and perhaps a touch of skepticism. Observers suggested, with a hint of dry humor, that American pilots might want to reconsider their choice of aircraft, implying that the P-47, despite its size and weight, was somehow less effective than expected. British pilots joked that the most effective evasive maneuver in the heavy, bulky P-47 was to simply unstrap and dash out of the cockpit, a humorous nod to the aircraft's spacious design and the challenges it posed in dogfights. However, beneath the surface of these early encounters, something unusual was unfolding, something that German intelligence had overlooked or underestimated. The P-47s that were being shot down often displayed incredible resilience. They had endured tremendous punishment before succumbing to enemy fire. For instance, one P-47 returned from a combat mission on May the 4th with a gruesome pattern of damage, 21 cannon holes and more than 100 hits from machine guns. Such a barrage of fire would have obliterated many of the smaller or more fragile fighters of that era, such as the Messerschmitt Bf-109 or the Spitfire, both of which relied on liquid-cooled engines and more vulnerable systems. In contrast, the P-47 was powered by a large radial engine, notable for its rugged construction and inherent resistance to damage. Unlike liquid-cooled engines, which could be rendered inoperable with a single hit to vital coolant lines, the P-47's radial engine shrugged off hits that would have been catastrophic to others. The engine's robust design meant it could absorb a significant amount of punishment and still keep functioning, giving the Thunderbolt a significant durability advantage in dogfights. More compelling was the fact that once the P-47s managed to get their guns on target, the consequences for the enemy were often devastating. The Thunderbolt's weapons array created what could only be described as a convergence zone of destruction, an area where German fighters encountered levels of damage they had never experienced before. Unlike earlier fighters armed with rifle-caliber weapons or limited cannon ammunition, the P-47 was equipped with powerful, high-caliber cannons that could sustain fire for over 30 seconds, an indefinite eternity in dogfighting terms. This sustained fire capacity fundamentally changed the face of aerial combat. The ability to maintain continuous, concentrated fire allowed American pilots to execute devastating attacks and inflict catastrophic damage on their targets. This new level of destructive potential was first demonstrated on June the 26th in the year 1943 over the skies of Lazo, France. The incident involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, an encounter that would later become legendary on both sides of the conflict and remain a defining moment in the evolution of aerial warfare. At that time, Johnson led a formation of 48 P-47 Thunderbolts returning from escort duty. While flying in tight formation, they were suddenly and unexpectedly engaged by 16 Focke-Wulf 190 fighters from the second group, led by Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, brother of the renowned ace Adolf Galland. The German attack was executed with flawless precision. They dove in from the sun with an overwhelming advantage of speed and surprise, catching the American fighters off guard. In the chaotic chaos of the dogfight, Johnson's Thunderbolt was caught in the destructive crossfire of multiple attacking fighters, suffering immediate and severe damage. Cannon shells exploding across his aircraft shattered the canopy, which was blown apart, and hydraulic fluid sprayed through the cockpit, obscuring vision and complicating control. The engine cowl was ripped away, and flames erupted behind the instrument panel, threatening to engulf the entire aircraft. Johnson, wounded by shrapnel and bullet fragments to his nose and leg, desperately attempted to bail out. However, he discovered that the canopy was jammed tight, a result of a 20-millimeter shell exploding within the canopy track, welding the canopy shut and trapping him inside a dying plane at an altitude of 27,000 feet. What happened next defied all expectations about damage tolerance in combat aircraft. Despite the overwhelming damages, no forward visibility through the oil-covered windscreen, a barely operational engine trembling violently, and controls responding only intermittently, Johnson managed to stabilize the crippled aircraft and gradually steer it toward Britain. In the chaotic aftermath of a fierce aerial engagement, a lone P-47 Thunderbolt, heavily damaged and clearly struggling, was seen limping back toward the channel at a rate of less than 170 miles per hour. This aircraft was believed to be from the 2nd Squadron of the renowned JG-26, a formidable German fighter unit. Despite extensive historical research and the examination of combat reports from that day, there has never been a definitive identification of the pilot who was flying that battered aircraft. Although various names have been proposed over the years, each based on fragments of German wartime records, none have been conclusively confirmed. What unfolded next was nothing short of extraordinary in the annals of aerial warfare. The German pilot, recognizing the vulnerable state of his opponent, maneuvered carefully behind the battered Thunderbolt, which was clearly on its last legs. Without hesitation, he unleashed a devastating barrage using his formidable 420mm cannon, complemented by two 13mm machine guns. The sheer destructive power of such fire was immense, and Johnson, the American pilot, had no means of evasion remaining. His only recourse was to hunker down behind his armored plate, hoping to withstand the relentless attack. The armored Thunderbolt absorbed the entire load of the cannon's ammunition, a testament to the sturdiness of the aircraft's design. Undeterred, the German pilot shifted position, closing the distance once more, and resumed firing, this time solely with his machine guns. With his cannon ammunition depleted, he pulled into a new position alongside Johnson's aircraft, visibly stunned as he gazed at the wrecked fighter. Johnson could clearly see his adversary's face in that moment, young and blonde, and his expression flickered through a gamut of emotions. Initial confidence, then confusion, and finally a shadow of fear. The German pilot, seemingly bewildered that his attack had not brought the aircraft down, repositioned again and unleashed the remainder of his machine gun ammunition into the battered Thunderbolt. Remarkably, the aircraft continued to fly despite the relentless punishment. The German pilot, now evidently out of ammunition, pulled alongside once more, shook his head in apparent disbelief at the resilience he was witnessing, gave an informal salute, a gesture of acknowledgement or respect, and then peeled away, heading out of range, probably out of ammunition or perhaps out of hope. Meanwhile, Johnson's P-47 made an emergency landing at Manston Airfield, where the damage was appallingly evident. The crew chief, surveying the aircraft's battered fuselage and wing structure, ceased counting bullet holes after reaching the number 200. The damage was staggering. One cannon shell had exploded mere inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the armor behind his seat, and the engine had suffered direct hits, threatening total failure. The control cables that managed the aircraft's maneuvering were only partially intact, and 3 of the 4 main longerons, the critical structural elements running along the aircraft's length, had been shot through, leaving the aircraft barely holding together. Yet despite such catastrophic damage, the aircraft had managed to bring Johnson safely back home. The fact that the aircraft survived such extensive attacks shocked both the American and German forces. The surviving wreckage became a curious symbol of the Thunderbolt's incredible resilience. American engineers examined the destroyed aircraft closely and realized that they had underestimated the durability of their creation. The combat reports from the second section of JG-26, initially dismissed by German intelligence as exaggerated, were later confirmed by multiple pilot testimonies. No aircraft was thought to be able to withstand such punishment and still remain airborne. Yet the Thunderbolt had absorbed everything the Luftwaffe's best fighters could throw at it and had survived. By July of the year 1943, American pilots had begun to understand and harness the true strengths of the P-47 Thunderbolt. One of the key figures in uncovering these tactics was Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zena, the commander of the 56th Fighter Group. Through relentless experimentation and brutal trial and error, he discovered that certain conventional wisdoms about dogfighting did not apply to the Thunderbolt. For example, it was crucial not to turn with the enemy at low altitude or to climb with them, as these maneuvers diminished the aircraft's formidable potential. Instead, pilots learned to leverage the Thunderbolt's substantial weight, its raw power, and its firepower to their advantage. The massive weight of the P-47, initially perceived as a disadvantage, was soon recognized as a crucial weapon in its own right. When diving, the aircraft's heavy mass made it almost impossible for German fighters to catch it. From high altitudes, say 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach the speeds of approximately 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter could manage even in a vertical dive. Such incredible speed was not solely used for quick assaults. It could also be converted into altitude through a zoom climb, a tactic that effectively left pursuing enemies helpless and unable to follow. Captain Walker Bard Mahurin, who, throughout the intense and brutal history of aerial combat, the tactics and firepower of American fighter planes, especially the P-47 Thunderbolt, proved to be a game-changer that ultimately shifted the balance of air superiority over Europe. In engagements that involved traditional dogfights, the P-47s, often organized into formations of 4 aircraft, would ascend majestically to altitudes reaching 30,000 feet, a height that German fighters found challenging to operate effectively at. From these lofty vantage points, when Luftwaffe fighters appeared beneath them, the American pilots would respond by executing a dramatic maneuver. They would roll their planes inverted, then dive rapidly towards the enemy. These high-velocity dives enabled the Thunderbolts to reach speeds so formidable that German defenders found it nearly impossible to aim accurately and bring their weapons to bear in time for successful deflection shooting. As they hurtled downward at these incredible velocities, the P-47 pilots would unleash their formidable armament. The bottom of these rapid dives was marked by a deafening barrage from the heavy machine guns on the aircraft. Witnesses and surviving German pilots alike later described the experience as akin to facing an unyielding wall of lead, a relentless barrage capable of creating an almost impenetrable zone of destruction. Any German aircraft unfortunate enough to be caught within this convergence of firepower would not merely fall from the sky, it would disintegrate utterly, torn apart by the devastating combined fire of the American guns. These aircraft would not just be shot down, they would be obliterated into fragments, with wings shattering from the fuselage, tails severed, and crews exposed to the brutal metal storm, often shredded into what could only be described as metallic confetti. The true extent of American aerial firepower was vividly demonstrated during a decisive dual attack carried out on the 17th of August, 1943, when American forces launched their deepest incursion into German territory at that point in the war. This daring raid targeted the cities of Schweinfurt and Regensburg, marking the most significant penetration into German airspace achieved up to that date. This operation not only underscored the capabilities of the formidable P-47 Thunderbolt, but also revealed its limitations, notably its range even when equipped with external drop tanks. Nevertheless, the mission vividly showcased the aircraft's terrifying effectiveness when employed with precision and coordination, an instrument of destruction that could alter the course of aerial combat. Leading this critical operation was Major David Schilling, commanding the 62nd Fighter Squadron. His squadron encountered a formation of German Messerschmitt 110 destroyers, twin-engine fighters that had been specifically designed to hunt down and destroy the American B-17 bombers using their heavy cannon and rocket armament. The Messerschmitt 100s, well-armed but comparatively less maneuverable, were regarded by the Luftwaffe as specialized fighters meant primarily for bomber interception rather than dogfighting. As Schilling's squadron of 4 Thunderbolts initiated their attack, they dove from an altitude of 28,000 feet, plunging down with precision and ferocity. One of the crew members aboard a nearby American aircraft, Offizier Heinrich Roth, who survived the fierce engagement, later recounted in a detailed interrogation how the attack unfolded. Roth described the American fighters as descending like thunderclaps from the heavens, their descent rapid and relentless. He recounted opening fire at approximately 800 meters, noting with vivid clarity the moment his shots made contact, striking the wing of one of the German fighters. Remarkably, the P-47 did not wobble or falter under the spray of gunfire, emphasizing the robustness of its design. Roth then provided a chilling account of what happened next. The German aircraft ahead of them suddenly disintegrated into fragments, as if torn apart by an invisible force. It was not merely shot down, it was utterly destroyed. Wings separated from the fuselage, the tail snapped off, and the crew compartment was reduced to a shower of metal shrapnel, leaving no doubt that the aircraft had been obliterated in a matter of seconds. In less than a minute, a dozen and more German Messerschmitts, 8 Messerschmitt 110s, had been reduced to wreckage and debris, their destruction a testament to the overwhelming power of the American firepower. This overwhelming force was made possible not only by the intensity and concentration of fire, but also by the extraordinary capacity of the American ammunition supply. Each P-47 was equipped with 425 rounds per gun, with a total payload nearing 3,400 rounds, roughly weighing nearly 900 pounds. When these aircraft reached the convergence point during an attack, typically set at a distance of around 300 yards, the ballistic trajectories of all 8 guns would intersect within a zone approximately 6 feet in diameter. Any enemy fighter caught within this zone would face an onslaught of 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at an astonishing 2,900 feet per second, delivering a relentless stream of destructive force. As the war progressed, a troubling and startling new reality began to emerge about the P-47 Thunderbolt, dramatically transforming the perception of its capabilities. This aircraft, once viewed primarily as a heavily armored but somewhat cumbersome bomber escort, had, through technological advancements, demonstrated an impressive and unexpected performance enhancement with increasing altitude. Its efficiency soared notably while the German fighters, which relied heavily on mechanical superchargers, faced mounting difficulties. The P-47 was equipped with a turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine, a marvel of engineering that maintained its rated power output up to an astonishing altitude of 30,000 feet. In stark contrast, the German fighters, which depended on either single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, saw their performance deteriorate significantly once they surpassed 25,000 feet. This fundamental difference in engine technology and performance at high altitude would prove to be a decisive factor in aerial combat. The deadly implications of this technological divergence became painfully clear during a fateful encounter involving one of Germany's most successful fighter aces, Hans Philipp. With a record tally of 206 victories, Philipp had earned a reputation as one of the Luftwaffe's most formidable pilots. Yet even his mastery was no match for the new realities of high-altitude aerial warfare. On the 8th of October in the year of 1943, Philippe found himself facing an unavoidable and tragic truth. Leading a formation of Jagdgeschwader fighters against a formidable B-17 flying fortress over Bremen at an altitude of 28,000 feet, Philipp quickly realized that his Focke-Wulf FW-190A6 was sluggish and unresponsive in the rarefied air of the upper atmosphere. The BMW 801 engine, powerful and reliable at moderate altitudes, was now gasping and straining almost 3 miles above the Earth's surface, its performance hindered by the thinness of the atmosphere, which starved its intake of oxygen. In this critical moment, the dominance of the P-47s from the United States became brutally evident. As 32,000 feet above the ground, the Thunderbolts of the 56th Fighter Group dove swiftly onto Philipp's formation, turning what might have been a fair fight into a perilous trap for the German fighters. At 31,000 feet, Robert Johnson, an already seasoned combat pilot who was rapidly ascending through the ranks to ace status, caught sight of Philipp's distinctive aircraft, its elaborate nose, art, and iconic markings standing out sharply against the sky. Johnson's report of the engagement was clinical and precise. He recalled opening fire from 300 yards distance, with a 30-degree deflection, observing hits along the entire length of the enemy's fuselage. Moments later, the enemy aircraft erupted into flames and disintegrated. There was no sign of a parachute, no sign of survival. Philipp's death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe, an unsettling and sobering reminder that even one of their most skilled and experienced pilots, someone who had survived more than 500 combat missions on both the Eastern and Western fronts, could not withstand the overwhelming power and high-altitude superiority of the Thunderbolt. This tragic loss prompted an immediate and intense investigation by the German High Command into the true capabilities of the P-47 Thunderbolt. The report, submitted to Reich Marshal Hermann Göring in November of 1943, delivered a sobering and unsettling picture of the American fighter's prowess. It revealed that the P-47 service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, a height unreachable by any German fighter of the era. Its dive speed was approaching the speed of sound, a startling revelation that underscored its remarkable aerodynamic design. The armor protection on the P-47 was extraordinary. A 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, half-inch thick bulletproof glass for the windscreen, and armored deflection plates strategically placed around the engine to withstand hits. Perhaps most alarming was the aircraft's rugged construction, capable of absorbing damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still enable the Thunderbolt to return safely to base. By January of 1944, a new variant of the P-47, the P-47D-22, began arriving in England, marking a decisive step in transforming the aircraft from a formidable but somewhat unwieldy fighter into a true nightmare for enemy pilots. This version was fitted with a Hamilton standard hydroatic propeller featuring blades 13 feet in diameter, with broad paddle-shaped edges that cut into the air with incredible force, akin to massive oars propelling the aircraft. The impact of this upgrade was immediate and remarkable. Where earlier Thunderbolts struggled to achieve a climb rate of just over 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could now soar at around 3,000 feet per minute, matching or even surpassing the performance of German fighters at most altitudes. Additionally, the larger propeller improved acceleration significantly, enabling the P-47s to build up energy more rapidly during level flight, thereby increasing their lethality and agility in combat. During an intense encounter near Hanover, our aircraft anticipated the usual tactical advantage that these skies traditionally offered. We assumed that our familiarity with the terrain and the element of surprise would favor us in combat. As we approached, the enemy suddenly turned to face us directly, engaging in a sharp maneuver to climb alongside. Our attempts to break away and disengage from their pursuit were met with persistent following. They matched our altitude and maintained their pursuit, ascending with us to the dizzying height of 30,000 feet. Tragically, Schmidt, one of our pilots, was caught in this deadly pursuit, and the explosion that followed obliterated him entirely, leaving nothing but remnants, a cloud of smoke and scattered fragments where his aircraft once burst apart. It's crucial to understand that those machines we once found amusing or underestimated just a year earlier are now far from the same. The introduction of paddle blade propellers has fundamentally transformed the performance of our fighters. These innovative blades did more than simply improve the aircraft's speed and agility. They altered the very soundscape of the Thunderbolt itself. The characteristic thunderous roar produced by the blade tips reaching supersonic velocities became a signature of the aircraft, a deafening, unmistakable signal of its presence. This distinctive, deep, and intimidating noise was so loud that German ground troops could often identify incoming P-47 fighters purely by sound, even before they could be seen. The Germans began referring to this ominous rumble as the Donnerschlag thunderclap, a name that conveyed both fear and awe, as it foretold imminent danger from above, death from the skies. By the early months of the year 1944, the P-47 Thunderbolt had evolved into an even more formidable weapon. When fitted with external fuel tanks, these aircraft could escort bombers over long distances deep into enemy territory. The standard loadout typically included either two wing-mounted tanks of 108 gallons each, or a single belly tank of 75 gallons, which extended operational range to over 1,000 miles. The paddle blade propeller system played a pivotal role here as well, delivering not only improved performance when the aircraft was fully loaded, but also impressive agility immediately after the tanks were jettisoned. This meant that the Thunderbolt could swiftly return to offensive combat roles after the initial bombing runs, fighting on relatively equal terms with enemy fighters once again. In response to this threat, the German Luftwaffe shifted their tactics, concentrating their efforts on targeting the bombers themselves, hoping to inflict losses great enough to halt the relentless American daylight bombing campaign. However, this strategy involved flying through the thick and increasingly lethal escort screens of P-47s, an operation that was becoming dangerously suicidal with each passing day. Over time, German pilots developed a grudging respect, some even bordering on open fear, for these large American fighters. Major WWII, one of Germany's most acclaimed aces, with an impressive tally of 275 victories, most of which were scored on the Eastern Front, was involved in a notorious encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, that left him severely wounded. Reflecting on this ordeal in a post-war interview, he recounted, "We saw them above us, as fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone chuckled and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' But nobody was laughing half a minute later. They descended like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass eliminated 3 of our fighters instantly, simply destroyed, reduced to burning debris. Unlike our fighters, whose guns fired in bursts, the Thunderbolts unleashed continuous streams of gunfire. Being caught in that relentless hail of bullets meant instant death." Moreover, the escort missions revealed yet another significant advantage of the P-47, its endurance. While German fighters operated at maximum power settings that rapidly drained their fuel supplies, the large American radial engines proved remarkably efficient at high altitudes. This allowed Thunderbolts to stay with the bombers for hours on end, providing continuous aerial cover by rotating in and out of the escort formation, while conserving enough fuel to fight if necessary and return safely to base. As the spring of 1944 brought a steady influx of P-51 Mustangs to assume long-range escort duties, the Thunderbolts increasingly shifted their focus from escort roles to ground attack missions. This transition was driven by the aircraft's formidable firepower and versatility in this new role, which made the Thunderbolt one of the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. This shift in operational focus began in earnest during April of 1944 as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine guns proved just as effective against ground targets, whether soft or armored. The standard armor-piercing incendiary rounds could penetrate the upper armor of most German vehicles, causing catastrophic damage. The sheer volume of fire produced by the aircraft was often sufficient to destroy soft targets within seconds. A well-aimed 2-second burst could deliver approximately 160 half-inches of projectiles. The size of a typical cargo truck is a familiar sight on roads and construction sites, Yet the evolution of military aircraft, like the P-47 Thunderbolt, reveals a transformation far beyond basic dimensions. Initially, the P-47 was designed primarily as a high-performance fighter, with its robust airframe and powerful engine giving it a formidable presence in the skies. However, it was the subsequent addition of weapons, particularly bombs and rockets, that elevated the P-47 from a mere aerial combatant into a versatile, multi-role combat machine capable of performing a wide range of mission types. This evolution turned the Thunderbolt into a true, multi-role monster, capable of delivering devastating firepower and precision strikes. The early variants of the P-47, such as the D-25, could carry a significant payload, reflecting its expanding role. This model was capable of mounting two 1,000-pound bombs beneath its wings, offering a formidable strike capability against ground targets. In addition, it could carry a 500-pound bomb underneath the fuselage, equating its destructive potential to that of medium-sized bombers used early in the war. As the war progressed, later versions of the aircraft were further enhanced with zero-length rocket stubs, allowing it to fire 10 high-velocity aircraft rockets, each of which was comparable in power to a 105mm artillery shell. These rockets could be used to devastating effect against concentrated ground targets, adding another layer of firepower to an already formidable aircraft. The combat experiences of men like Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, vividly illustrate the deadly effectiveness of the P-47 in ground attack roles. Their strikes came from very low altitudes, so low that pilots' faces were sometimes visible from the ground, emphasizing the intimate danger involved. The sound of these attacks was frightening, a cacophony of roaring engines, screaming rockets, and the relentless hammering of heavy machine guns. Witnesses described entire columns of trucks being utterly annihilated during single passes. In mere moments, 20 vehicles could be reduced to burning wreckage, leaving devastation in their wake. Such scenes had a profound psychological impact on enemy troops. These aircraft, dubbed Jabos, or fighter bombers, went beyond simple interception or air superiority roles. They resembled flying artillery, potent, precise, and deadly, capable of sniping at targets on the ground with uncanny accuracy. The significance of the P-47's influence was especially apparent on D-Day, June the 6th, year of 1944, when the Allies launched the invasion of Normandy. On that historic day, over 500 Thunderbolts formed an almost impenetrable aerial shield over the beaches, offering critical air cover that effectively sealed off the German defenses. German fighters attempting to break through this protective umbrella were systematically slaughtered. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of the German Luftwaffe, in his report from Jagdschade, explained that the sky had belonged entirely to the Americans. He vividly recalled how the Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level up to 30,000 feet, creating a layered, multi-altitude barrier. Attempts by German fighters to engage at dawn ended in disaster. Only 12 fighters from his group attempted to challenge the P-47s, and he was the sole survivor to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude, impossible to climb over or dive beneath, firing relentless bursts that turned enemy fighters into falling aluminum fragments. In the weeks after D-Day, the P-47s continued their relentless campaign of destruction against German logistical and military movements during daylight hours. The results were staggering, and the statistics speak volumes about their destructive efficiency. During June alone, the 9th Air Force's Thunderbolts claimed the destruction of 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, more than 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and over 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles. These figures illustrate how thoroughly the German war machine was dismantled on the ground, as the Wehrmacht was compelled to operate only under cover of night, severely hampering their ability to respond against the advancing Allied forces. Despite their undeniable success, the Germans desperately sought ways to counter the formidable threat posed by the P-47 Thunderbolt. They responded with various measures, reinforcing vehicle armor, deploying additional anti-aircraft defenses, and developing new camouflage techniques, all in an attempt to reduce the aircraft's effectiveness. Yet none of these efforts yielded significant results. The unique combination of speed, heavy armor, and overwhelming firepower made the P-47 nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak guns, known for their anti-aircraft capabilities, struggled to keep pace with the fast-moving Thunderbolts at low altitude. As devastating as their impact was over Europe, the Thunderbolt's versatility was also proving invaluable in the Pacific theater. In that vast and challenging environment, the aircraft's qualities suited the demands of the Pacific War better than perhaps any other. The Japanese, having grown accustomed to engaging and overcoming the smaller, more agile American fighters, found themselves unprepared for the formidable combination of firepower and resilience embodied by the P-47 Thunderbolt. Unlike their previous encounters with American aircraft, they soon realized that the P-47 was a different kind of challenge altogether. One notable Japanese ace, Saburo Sakai, who fought against P-47s over the dense jungles of New Guinea, later described the encounter vividly. He and his comrades nicknamed the Thunderbolt the Monster because of its intimidating presence and overwhelming capabilities. Sakai recounted that their standard armament, the 20mm cannon, which was quite effective against the more lightly armed P-40s, appeared useless against the P-47s, even after firing dozens of rounds. He watched in disbelief as one Thunderbolt absorbed their barrage and simply flew away, seemingly unaffected. The return fire from the P-47s was equally terrifying, with streams of heavy explosion causing bullets ripping through aircraft and armor, often tearing enemy planes apart in moments. As the war progressed, the P-47 was extensively modified for the unique demands of the Pacific theater. The P-47N variant was designed specifically to extend its operational range, crucial for long-distance missions over vast oceanic expanses. This model featured increased fuel capacity, with the wings outfitted with wet tanks capable of holding 93 gallons each. These modifications significantly extended the Thunderbolt's range, reaching approximately 2,350 miles. Such an enhancement allowed the P-47N to escort the mighty B-29 superfortresses all the way to the Japanese home islands, transforming the aircraft from a short-range fighter into a true long-range escort. This evolution of the Thunderbolt demonstrated the remarkable adaptability and continuous development of the aircraft, showing that the original, shorter-range fighter of 1943 had grown into a versatile and effective long-distance weapon system. Perhaps the most compelling testament to the P-47 Thunderbolt's evolution and its combat versatility was its surprising effectiveness against German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me 262, which could reach a breathtaking top speed of roughly 540 miles per hour, was generally considered untouchable by the slower propeller-driven fighters. Yet experienced Thunderbolt pilots learned that under specific circumstances, they could still bring down the jets. These moments included takeoff and landing phases when the jets were most vulnerable and during high-speed dives from high altitudes. On the 27th of November in 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Muir, flying with the 352nd Fighter Group, made history by becoming among the first pilots to shoot down an Me 262 with a P-47. During a daring dive from 28,000 feet, Muir's Thunderbolt approached speeds nearing 500 miles per hour. The jet, confident in its speed advantage, failed to notice the P-47 until the guns opened fire at a mere 400 yards. Muir's combat report vividly described the destruction, noting that the enemy aircraft disintegrated under the withering fire from his .850 caliber machine guns. Large fragments, including both of the jet's engines, separated from the fuselage, and unfortunately, the German pilot did not survive the encounter. This victory proved that the concentrated firepower of the Thunderbolt could, under the right conditions, pose a serious threat even to the sleekest German jets. By early 1945, the P-47 had undergone further refinement to better counter new threats, including the German Me 262 and the V-1 flying bombs. Special variants, such as the P-47M, were developed with upgraded engines powered by water methanol injection, boosting their output to approximately 2,800 horsepower. Along with improved aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could reach the speeds of about 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet. Such speed was sufficient to intercept jets under certain operational conditions, solidifying the Thunderbolt's reputation as a formidable all-altitude fighter capable of meeting emerging threats head-on. Major George Bostwick of the 63rd Fighter Squadron, equipped with P-47s, notably achieved the difficult feat of downing two Me-2 62s in March of 1945. His tactical assessments highlighted that while the jets had superior speed, they were limited in maneuverability and could not withstand sustained punishment. Bostwick emphasized in his reports that a well-placed burst from the Thunderbolt's guns could rapidly disable the jets, causing them to fall apart as if constructed from paper. The German fighters had to slow down drastically when attacking American bombers, making them even more vulnerable to the Thunderbolt's firepower. This tactical advantage allowed American pilots to exploit the jets' momentary loss of speed. The ultimate display of American industrial and military might occur during what was known as Operation Boden-Patter, a desperate and large-scale effort by the German Luftwaffe to eliminate Allied air power on New Year's Day in 1945. Nearly 900 German on the ground, a formidable array of the 9th Air Forces might stood ready. 22 thunderous P-47 Thunderbolts lined up alongside several other aircraft, exemplifying the sheer scale of the aerial effort. Among the captured German pilots brought before the command post, one pointed at the blazing wreckage of a downed aircraft and sneered, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brookings' reply quickly became legendary within the ranks of the 9th Air Force. Instead of retaliating or showing frustration, he simply gestured toward the flight line where diligent ground crews were already at work. These crews were methodically pushing aside the mangled remains of damaged aircraft and preparing solid, concrete stands for the incoming replacements. Brookings' calm confidence was clear as he stated, "By tomorrow we'll have 40 new ones." Then he turned to the German pilot and asked pointedly, "How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The smug smirk that had adorned the German pilot's face vanished immediately, replaced by a look of uncertainty. It was a stark illustration of the American resilience and rapid repair capabilities. Within just 48 hours, dozens of freshly manufactured P-47 D-40 fighters, flown in from depots stationed across the Atlantic in England, lined the flight line, ready for combat. This rapid turnaround was a testament to the industrial might and logistical might of the United States, an advantage the Germans could never match. During the Battle of Boden-Platter, the Luftwaffe suffered an immense loss. A staggering 271 aircraft and 213 pilots, many of whom were irreplaceable instructors and experienced squadron leaders. These specific losses struck a blow from which the German Air Force could never fully recover. In comparison, the Americans lost a total of 134 aircraft across all the attacked airfields. Yet remarkably, these American aircraft were often replaced within a week, underscoring the efficiency of their production lines and logistics. The numbers painted a clear picture of the strategic reality. While the Germans faced mounting, irreplaceable losses that threatened their very to sustain the fight, the Americans showcased an unmatched capacity for production and renewal. Over the course of the war, Republic Aviation manufactured an astonishing 15,683 P-47 Thunderbolts, more than any other American fighter aircraft line. At the height of wartime production, the Farmingdale plant on Long Island operated relentlessly, completing a new Thunderbolt roughly every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Meanwhile, over in Indiana, the Evansville plant, established from scratch on previously empty farmland in 1942, had ramped up its output to produce 500 aircraft each month by 1944. Each P-47D was an engineering marvel, requiring 65,000 individual parts. The assembly involved 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone contained 2,400 machine components, each engineered to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Yet despite this complexity, American workers, many of whom were women with little or no prior aviation experience before Pearl Harbor, assembled these intricate machines with precision that exceeded peacetime standards. The scale of ammunition production was equally staggering. Every sortie flown by a P-47 depended on around 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, with hundreds of Thunderbolts taking to the skies daily. By mid-1944, the monthly consumption of ammunition surpassed 10 million rounds, showcasing the relentless tempo of the air war. One of the key facilities responsible for supplying this ammunition was the Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several plants dedicated to manufacturing these vital projectiles. At Lake City, 30 million rounds were produced each month, with each cartridge manufactured to exacting tolerances in the 10,000th of an inch, ensuring flawless feeding through synchronized gun mechanisms under the most demanding conditions. The fuel consumption of these aircraft was equally prodigious. In standard flight, each Thunderbolt burned around 100 gallons of fuel per hour. During combat, especially with water injection engaged to boost performance, that figure could rise to 300 gallons per hour. By late 1944, the 9th Air Force alone was consuming over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly, all shipped across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves a product of America's mass industrial output. Another testament to the country's vast logistical capabilities. Perhaps even more impressive than the aircraft production was the preparation of the pilots themselves. By 1944, the United States was graduating some 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training programs, a number that exceeded the total number of German pilots trained during the entire war. Each American P-47 pilot underwent at least 400 hours of flight training before seeing combat, including 100 hours specifically in advanced fighters. In stark contrast, German pilots often entered combat with less than 100 hours of total flying time, a disparity that was reflected in their performance. This disparity in training and experience was evident. During the intense and rigorous training programs, the pilots were well versed in a multitude of critical skills essential for their aerial combat duties. Their education covered the intricacies of formation flying, mastering the precise coordination needed to operate effectively as a cohesive unit. They also received extensive instruction in instrument navigation, which was vital for maintaining course and altitude during complex missions, especially in poor visibility conditions. Additionally, they honed their skills in gunnery, practicing the art of accurate shooting from high speeds and various angles. Tactics formed a core part of their training, encompassing offensive and defensive maneuvers, coordinating attacks, and evading enemy fire. The training regimen included extensive practice against captured enemy aircraft, primarily German models, which provided invaluable insights into their strengths and weaknesses. By studying and simulating combat against these authentic adversaries, pilots gained a deeper understanding of the enemy's capabilities, what they could and could not do, giving them a strategic advantage in actual warfare. Moreover, it was standard for American pilots to familiarize themselves intimately with their own aircraft systems, often going beyond manuals and technical documents. They studied detailed technical manuals that German pilots never had access to, allowing them to exploit every feature, system, and weakness of their own planes with confidence and precision. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts exemplified the immense advantage conferred by American training upon arriving in England in September of 1944. His extensive flying hours, over 400 in total, including more than 75 hours specifically in a P-47 Thunderbolt, gave him a level of experience that far surpassed that of most German pilots. His training included firing practice at towed targets, mastering deflection shooting techniques, and analyzing gun camera footage from actual combat situations. With such preparation, Roberts entered his first combat mission with complete clarity about his role and objectives. He knew exactly what to do, how to handle his aircraft, and how to engage the enemy. Meanwhile, the German pilot facing him was likely to possess less than half of Roberts's combat experience. In fact, it was hardly a contest, more of an unfair confrontation than an even fight. By March of the year 1945, the tide of the air war had shifted dramatically for Germany. The Luftwaffe, once a formidable force, had become largely an empty shell, something more paper than substance. Severe shortages of fuel meant most aircraft remained grounded, unable to take to the skies. The most experienced German pilots had either fallen in combat or been captured, leaving behind a diminished and inexperienced cadre. The airfields, once bustling hubs of activity, had been reduced to cratered ruins, rendering them unusable for operations. Despite having some remaining aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an insurmountable challenge. The American forces, especially the formidable P-47 Thunderbolt formations, held dominance across the entire spectrum of altitude, from ground level up to 40,000 feet. These fighters had become symbols of American air power, heavily armed, resilient, and relentless. Feldwebel. Klaus Brechender, one of the last German pilots to receive training in 1945, flew only a single combat mission before the war concluded. His experience over Leipzig lasted a mere 12 seconds. He recounted how he saw 4 Thunderbolts diving from above, perfectly in formation, ready to strike. He attempted to evade by turning, but their speed was overwhelming. The lead aircraft fired from about 500 meters away, and in the blink of an eye his aircraft was struck. The engine exploded and the wing was torn off. He barely managed to escape by parachute, witnessing the destruction of his entire unit in that brief encounter. In that fleeting moment, the sky was filled with burning aluminum and wreckage, a vivid testament to the overwhelming firepower and tactical superiority of the Allied forces. The psychological toll on German pilots was devastating. Following such encounters, many suffered trauma, developing what could only be described as a form of mental paralysis or medical trauma, resulting from the relentless and destructive might of their enemies. The combination of technological superiority, overwhelming firepower, and the relentless supply chain that supported American aircraft, delivering unlimited production capabilities, meant that the Germans were fighting a losing battle. The Americans could afford to lose 10 aircraft and quickly rebuild them. They could lose 1, and it was gone forever. Their pilots arrived in the theater with better training, better resources, and more ammunition than their German counterparts could ever hope to have, simply because American industrial capacity far outstripped the German ability to produce and supply. All they had was courage, a quality that could not be underestimated, but courage alone was insufficient in the face of such material and logistical superiority. Without resources, that courage was merely delaying the inevitable defeat. As the war progressed, the Germans recognized this reality. In 1943, they had laughed at the formidable American aircraft and tactics, but by 1945, there was no room for mockery. They were now fully aware of the destructive reality they faced. The thunderous, mechanical sound of American guns and engines became a haunting reminder of death's approach. During the tumultuous years of World War II, a peculiar and disturbing phenomenon emerged among soldiers and pilots on both sides of the conflict. Referred to colloquially as jabot fever, this condition manifested through various physical symptoms that would suddenly appear whenever the ominous sound of thunderbolts or lightning strikes echoed through the area. For veterans who had previously faced the deadly fury of Spitfires and Hurricanes without experiencing any fear or discomfort, these mental and physical reactions marked a stark contrast to their previous bravery. Prior to engaging in combat against the formidable P-47 Thunderbolt fighter planes, many of these seasoned warriors found themselves overwhelmed by anxiety and physical distress, revealing the powerful psychological impact of the aircraft's loud, distinctive thunderclap, which unnervingly echoed across the battlefield. The deafening roar of approaching thunderbolts, a sound that could be heard long before the aircraft appeared in the sky, often triggered panic among ground troops. Understanding that quick access to cover meant the difference between life and death, soldiers would scramble for shelter immediately upon hearing the thundering noise, knowing all too well that survival was intimately tied to their ability to react swiftly in the face of aerial predators. This visceral reaction underscored the intense psychological strain experienced during combat, where sound alone could instill terror even in the most hardened soldiers. When examining the vast scope of the P-47 Thunderbolt's operational record, the numbers are staggering. In the European theater alone, Allied pilots managed to destroy a total of over 3,752 German aircraft in aerial combat, an achievement that marked a significant strategic advantage. Additionally, the aircraft were responsible for obliterating over 3,315 enemy planes on the ground, effectively crippling the Luftwaffe's ability to replenish its forces and maintain its aerial dominance. Beyond the skies, the Thunderbolt units played a crucial role in disrupting enemy logistics, with their relentless attacks destroying approximately 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, and 6,000 armored fighting vehicles. In the Pacific theater, the destruction extended even further. An estimated 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles were annihilated, along with hundreds of Japanese aircraft, including about 697 engaged in aerial combat and another 150 wrecked on the ground. The campaign also claimed countless barges, ships, and strategic installations, emphasizing the scope and effectiveness of Allied air power. Specifically, the Ninth Air Force, which was primarily equipped with the formidable P-47 Thunderbolt fighters, played an instrumental role in the Allied victory. Over the course of the war, this force flew an astonishing sum of approximately 213,873 combat sorties, each a dangerous and demanding mission. During these operations, the pilots dropped about 120,000 tons of bombs, fired an overwhelming total of 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched roughly 60,000 rockets, demonstrating their relentless offensive capacity. The Thunderbolt units achieved an impressive kill ratio of approximately 4.6 to 1 in air-to-air combat, meaning they shot down nearly 5 enemy aircraft for every one they lost. This remarkable efficiency was complemented by their record-low loss rates, making them the most effective and least costly fighter bomber in the entire Allied arsenal. Behind these impressive figures, however, lies a somber human toll. The German Luftwaffe suffered approximately 28,000 pilots killed in action against Western Allied forces throughout the conflict. Many of these pilots met their end due to the concentrated and relentless firepower of American heavy machine guns, which proved highly effective in combat. Each lost pilot represented not merely a casualty, but also a loss of years of training and experience, an irreplaceable gap in Germany's military capabilities. By the war's conclusion, the average German fighter pilot had accumulated fewer than 30 hours of combat experience, a testament to the high casualty rate and the intense, brutal nature of aerial warfare. In stark contrast, the average American P-47 pilot had accumulated well over 200 hours of combat time, reflecting the extensive training and experience gained during the conflict. In examining the intelligence and assessment reports from German interrogation centers, particularly at Ober-Ursel, one can trace how perceptions of the P-47 Thunderbolt evolved dramatically over the years. When captured Allied pilots were debriefed by German intelligence, the records they provided, especially those later seized in 1945, revealed a complete reversal of earlier judgments. Initially, the P-47 was regarded as a large, unwieldy fighter, inferior in most respects to German aircraft. Its performance parameters, such as maneuverability and speed, considered subpar, with the exception of its remarkable dive speed. Its machine guns, though numerous, offered insufficient armor-piercing capabilities against the more powerful German cannon-armed fighters, leading German analysts to regard it as a minimal threat. By the end of 24 months, however, the assessment of the P-47 had undergone a profound transformation. Its high-altitude performance was celebrated for its exceptional strength and structural integrity, allowing it to withstand significant damage. Its firepower continued to. In the tumultuous years of the early 1940s, a significant misjudgment was made, a mistake that would later become painfully evident in the course of history. Back in 1943, amidst the chaos of war, we, the Allied forces, looked upon a particular aircraft and dismissed it with derision. It was a large, heavily armored fighter aircraft, imposing in appearance, and in our eyes somewhat unwieldy and unwelcome. We couldn't help but chuckle at its size and bulk, convinced that the Americans simply did not understand the nuances of aerial combat. Our assumption was that they had somehow managed to develop a machine that looked more like a bomber repurposed as a fighter, a glorified flying fortress that couldn't possibly excel in the rigorous realities of dogfights. We believed that the Americans had fundamentally misunderstood what it took to craft an effective combat aircraft for the skies over Europe and beyond. As history unfolded, it became painfully clear that it was we who had failed to grasp the true nature of aerial warfare during that time. The Americans, on the other hand, did not bother with building a European-style fighter in the traditional sense. Instead, they focused on creating a machine that embodied their own strategic priorities, one designed with mass production, formidable firepower, and remarkable resilience at its core. Their approach was based on a keen understanding that in a prolonged war of attrition, the aircraft that could withstand the rigors of combat and still deliver relentless, devastating firepower would ultimately come out on top. Their logic was sound, and as history proved, profoundly effective. It wasn't until after the war, when I had the opportunity to fly a captured P-47 Thunderbolt, that I truly appreciated the genius behind its design. The power this aircraft held was nothing short of extraordinary. It surged upward with such force that it seemed as if it was climbing against gravity itself. The cockpit was spacious and comfortable, a rarity among fighters, and offered superb visibility, allowing a pilot to keep watch on all sides. The controls responded with an impeccable precision that made handling intuitive and confident. It was, in essence, a fighter crafted for the pilot, a robust machine that was as much a piece of industrial art as it was a weapon of war, armored sufficiently to survive enemy fire while still maintaining agility. What struck me most profoundly, however, was the realization of the sheer scale of American industrial effort. Over 15,000 of these complex, highly engineered aircraft had been produced, despite the enormous challenge of simultaneously fighting across two vast oceans. Each P-47 was a marvel of engineering, with an engine more sophisticated than anything Germany had managed to produce during the conflict. The speed of American manufacturing, especially in light of the intricate complexity of each aircraft, was astonishing, faster than the construction of simpler fighters by our own factories. This realization struck a chord deep within me, revealing that, in truth, we never stood a chance against such relentless industrial might. The thunderous sound emanating from those aircraft guns, a deep, resonant noise that pilots fondly or fearfully called Roosevelt's piano, became an unforgettable part of our combat experience. That distinctive rattle, once heard, was etched into the memories of every fighter pilot. Many of my comrades heard it for the last time, as the deadly fire of the P-47 was decisive in battle, capable of turning the tide even against the most formidable enemies. The P-47 didn't merely challenge the Luftwaffe. In many cases, it obliterated it. Its dominance in combat was a testament to the strength of American industrial philosophy, an ethos rooted in brute force engineering, backed by unlimited resources and relentless determination. Every component of the P-47 was overbuilt, overpowered, and intricately designed to maximize performance. The wing spars alone could support an astonishing 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's fully loaded weight. The engine mount was engineered to endure forces of 12 times the force of gravity, ensuring durability in the chaos of dogfights. Control cables ran in doubled layers throughout the aircraft, with automatic backup systems in place to prevent failure during critical moments. The ammunition feed system was a marvel of engineering ingenuity, consisting of no fewer than 8 separate boxes, each loaded with a hefty 4 125 rounds, all managed by electric boost motors to prevent jams during aggressive maneuvers. The guns themselves were electrically heated to resist freezing at high altitudes, and each had its own charging mechanism, allowing for individual synchronization tailored to the pilot's preferences. The convergence point for the guns was adjustable, stretching from 150 yards to 400 yards, so pilots could fine-tune their fire for maximum effectiveness at different engagement ranges. This level of precision and flexibility was a remarkable feature for a fighter aircraft. Even after the conflict ended, some German veterans insisted that the P-47's victory programs owed more to sheer numbers than to superior technology, claiming that German fighters had been the technically better machines but were simply overwhelmed by the sheer volume of American aircraft. However, the formidable P-47 Thunderbolt, often regarded as one of the most iconic fighters of World War II, represented a remarkable achievement in aviation engineering and combat effectiveness. Its design and performance impressed even the most skeptical, transforming from an object of mockery to a symbol of aerial dominance within a remarkably short span of less than 2 years. Initially, many German pilots viewed the aircraft with disdain, dismissing it as a cumbersome and ineffectual machine. However, such perceptions quickly dissolved as the Thunderbolt proved its lethal capability time and again, striking fear into the Luftwaffe's ranks and earning its place among the most feared fighters of the conflict. One of the key features that set the P-47 apart was its impressive armament and firepower. Equipped with 8 synchronized Browning machine guns, each firing powerful rounds, it could unleash a devastating burst of lead that would decimate enemy aircraft and ground targets alike. The aircraft's armament was so formidable that it effectively redefined the rules of aerial combat, allowing even relatively inexperienced pilots to cause significant destruction. Its heavy weapons load enabled it to deliver more firepower than a small infantry squad, making it a true flying tank on the battlefield. The weaponry included a variety of rounds, notably the American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary projectiles. These shells featured a sophisticated delayed-action fuse designed to ensure they penetrated enemy targets before detonating. The incendiary component of the rounds burned at an astonishing 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum structures, a feature that made the aircraft particularly lethal against enemy ships, planes, and ground installations. Meanwhile, the German 20mm shells, though larger and heavier, often detonated upon contact with the surface, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage rather than penetrating deeply. In terms of size and power, the P-47 was a colossus among piston-driven fighters. Its empty weight alone was 10,000 pounds, surpassing the gross weight of many twin-engine fighters that flew during the war. This immense weight was a testament to its ruggedness and firepower. Its powerful engine produced more thrust and horsepower than entire formations of bombers from previous conflicts, enabling it to carry heavy loads and sustain high speeds. From a strategic perspective, the P-47's arsenal and physical resilience meant that it could engage with multiple enemy aircraft, destroy ground targets with precision, and endure considerable damage, all qualities that contributed to its legendary status. Remarkably, the aircraft was largely assembled and operated by young men barely out of high school, many of whom learned to maintain and fly these complex machines in just a few weeks under wartime conditions. Despite the rapid training and the intense operational environment, the P-47 proved extremely reliable and effective. Its widespread production and the skillful maintenance by these young crews turned it into a symbol of American industrial strength and ingenuity. The transformation of German opinion about the Thunderbolt from skepticism to outright fear was rapid and definitive. By the time the aircraft had been in service for less than 2 years, it had earned a reputation as a relentless aerial predator. Veteran pilots from multiple nations, having faced the formidable Spitfire, Hurricane, and Soviet Yaks without flinching, spoke in hushed tones decades after the war about the terror the P-47 inspired. In the United States Air Force Museum, located in Dayton, Ohio, a meticulously restored P-47D is displayed among other legendary fighters. Its informational placard lists its specifications and the numerous battles it participated in, but the true story of its impact is captured in a small display case containing spent .50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under intense fire. Below this display, a quote from an unnamed German pilot, extracted during a 1945 interrogation, encapsulates the aircraft's terrifying reputation. The pilot recounted how initially they had laughed at the prospect of facing these fat, ugly American fighters, believing them to be clunky and ineffectual, incapable of turning tightly, climbing swiftly, or fighting effectively. Yet their laughter faded quickly as they realized that the P-47 did not require complex maneuvers to be deadly. It simply pointed its guns at the enemy, and the enemy ceased to exist. The pilot noted that their laughter died with their comrades, replaced by dread and despair. By the end of the war, the P-47 Thunderbolt had transitioned from a subject of derision to a weapon of annihilation. Its 8 Browning machine guns, synchronized perfectly, unleashed a torrent of lead that buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of destruction. The aircraft's durability, firepower, and versatility made it a true flying fortress, capable of engaging enemy fighters, strafing ground targets, and surviving formidable opposition. No German pilots remained to mock or laugh by May of 1945, for the Thunder had spoken with undeniable authority, and the skies belonged to America.